From 12 News, this is Newsmakers.
Whether it's the future of the state's hospitals or a dangerous industrial fire on Allens Avenue, Attorney General Peter Neronha is often a key player in Rhode Island's biggest news stories. With 2 years left in his term and big ambitions for his office, what are the AG's top priorities for the rest of 2024? Our guest this week on Newsmakers, Attorney General Peter Neronha. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White alongside 12 News politics editor Ted Nesi. Our guest is Attorney General Peter Neronha, a regular guest on Newsmakers, and we appreciate that. Well into the double digits we were counting this morning. We have a lot to talk about with you as always, but I want to begin with the biggest story impacting tens of thousands of people, and that's the Washington Bridge. Very soon, we are expecting details of a lawsuit the state is expected to bring against contractors in the wake of the bridge's failure. You're not involved in that. Governor McKee hired outside counsel Max Wistow. But I'm wondering if you think pursuing civil litigation was the right approach at this stage.
Well, first let me say that, in recent days we've had some contact with Mr. Wistow and Mr. Savage, and there may be a role for our office in that litigation. Well, look, I think that our office is best positioned to represent the state in any litigation, and I think there's a role for us there, and I'm not ready to sort of talk about it much more than that. But I think for the sake of the taxpayers, the involvement of our office is important. And I hope to achieve that in the coming days.
You had been a little critical of the litigation in a tweet. You talked about how that scared off contractors and all of that. So to my original question, did they take the right approach in terms of timing?
Well, look, I think there's a question between how you handle litigation and whether to bring it or not. I don't know enough at this stage to say whether or not litigation is warranted here. Certainly investigating whether it is, was, and is. There's different styles. I'm not really a saber rattler until it's time, to go to war, frankly. And so I think if you're going to sue somebody or bring a case against somebody, then you bring it. And that's my typical approach. I do think it's very possible that when you create an environment where the goal is to simply bring lawsuits, and I'm not saying that's the goal, but that can be the appearance of the goal. Look, the proof is in the pudding, right? We're 8-9 months out. We don't have a bid to build a bridge, let alone a bridge. So that's a problem, and we need to get that moving.
Final question on this, and I'll hand it over to Ted. When people hear that, as you said in your first answer, your office might play a role, people are going to think, oh, Attorney General, could be a criminal investigation.
No.
So this would stay purely civil.
Yes, the strength of my civil division is extraordinary. And I think Rhode Islanders are starting to learn that. They'll continue to learn it. We have built an incredible group of fine lawyers there. And I know we're going to talk about a lot of their work. But yes, I view this as a civil matter at this point. I expect it will remain that way. But again, I'm not steeped in the facts yet. I think that's likely to change. I hope that it will. And we'll see where it goes. You'll certainly be hearing more about that in the coming days.
Okay, we'll talk about another huge issue you've been very involved in, Prospect Medical Holdings, the for-profit owner of Roger Williams and Fatima Hospitals. There's so many tentacles to this. I want to see if I can try to keep the conversation in a way that the viewers can follow. But long story short, they have deep financial problems. You've been battling for years on multiple fronts. Do you think today those hospitals are on track to close?
I think they could close unless we find a path forward. I will say this. I think if you contrast what's happening in Massachusetts with Steward and its 15 or so community hospitals, 2 have closed already.
We should say that includes St. Anne's, Morgan, some local hospitals.
Yes. And what's happening in Rhode Island, we're in much better shape. I'll tell you why. So in Massachusetts, 2 hospitals have already closed. And the state has had to put in already $30 million just to get those hospitals to buyers, or just to keep them going until perhaps a buyer will buy them. So that's $30 million of taxpayer money that's already gone in. In contrast to here in Rhode Island, where we have the exact same thing going on with Prospect, we've taken $80 million out of the private equity owners who own them, and we still have $45 million left. So right now, there's no taxpayer money going in to keep them open. It's their money that's keeping them open. And my hope is that we can reach a place where those hospitals have an opportunity, if they turn it around as to how they're managing them, where they can go forward with a pool of money that we have retained for them, that escrow, that $80 million escrow that we got 3 years ago, to give them kind of a starting place. They have no endowment. That would be the makings of an endowment. So we're in a much better place in Massachusetts, frankly, because of the foresight of the team back at the office. And so I'm really concerned. It's only because we've had that $80 million that they haven't closed those two hospitals. There's a chance for them to turn it around. But the broader picture of healthcare, I think, will drive whether or not that's achievable for them and some other hospitals too, not just them.
One other question on this, in the hospitals. Dr. Michael Fine, who's former head of the health department, had an interesting essay recently where he suggested part of the problem here is there are still too many hospitals in Rhode Island, that the footprint is just doesn't fit basically what I guess healthcare revenue can support, kind of the way people need care. As someone who spent a lot of time thinking about hospitals in recent years, what do you think of that idea?
Well, I've asked the question myself, and the best way to ask that question is to go to the other hospitals and ask them. I mean, they have no dog in the fight, right? So you ask them, if those two hospitals close today, Dr. Wagner, who runs Care New England, or John Fernandez, president of Lifespan, how would that impact you? That's the last thing they want to see happen. They can't take the overflow. Recently, there were 80 people at Roger Williams and Fatima that would need behavioral health beds. Butler can't take those people. There's no room for them. Neither can Lifespan. So we need those beds. We need them. You know, part of the problem is that some of the beds that Lifespan has aren't staffed because they don't have the workforce we need, which again is a function of how we have structured healthcare in Rhode Island. You know, you need to go up to 50,000 feet and fix the problem, but we're seeing the results of the problem in Roger Williams and Fatima and in some other areas, like not being able to find a doctor and that sort of thing.
Let's stick with healthcare. You opposed a more than 14% premium rate increase proposal or ask by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island that they sought with the state health insurance commissioner. And I'm sure that's very popular to hear for people at home who pay for health insurance. But you've also said hospitals and healthcare providers need better reimbursement rates, yet you're trying to block premium rate hikes. Aren't those two things in conflict?
Not in this context, because where we're trying to block it is, in that particular case of the 14%, is on about 17,000 people who buy it on the individual market. So think about that for a minute. 17,000 people who have to buy insurance on the individual market are faced Blue Cross asked for a 9% increase 2 years ago, a 9% increase last year, and a 14% increase this year. So what you're doing is you're saving the system on the backs, in part, of 17,000 people. If you look at the number of Rhode Islanders who are insured outside of Medicaid, Medicare, and self-insurance, like the state and large employers, it's about 174,000 people in Rhode Island. When you raise rates only on that group, and don't consider rates for everybody else, Medicare, Medicaid, and those self-insureds, what you're doing is asking 174,000 Rhode Islanders, many of them buying it for themselves and their families, to pay the freight.
Yeah, so but they can't control the Medicare, Medicaid. Like
they can't, but we can, and that's my point by objecting to these rates. If we're going to try to solve our healthcare problems through OHIC, we won't solve them. We have to go back to the beginning and rethink everything.
OHIC being, just for people, the Health Insurance Commissioner.
Right. We're trying to build health policy through an insurance commissioner. You can't do it that way. You have to go back and you have to fix Medicaid. You have to fix Medicare. You have to fix commercial for everybody, for the self-insured, because Blue Cross runs those programs. So you've got to look at you've got to look at this holistically to fix it. But you can't fix it on the backs of 17,000 people. That's not fair and it's not right.
So you think fundamentally, this is interesting. You need to take kind of a global view of everyone who pays for healthcare, which actually means every institution, every insurer, every government entity, et cetera, across Rhode Island's 1.1 million people, the vast majority of whom have some form of insurance.
Exactly.
And rebalance who pays what.
Rebalance it and raise the rates in places. Raise Medicaid. Understand that if we don't raise Medicaid, we can't fix the provider shortage problem, and we can't shore up community hospitals like Roger Williams and Fatima in the long run. We may save them for 2 or 3 years, but we can't save them in the long run. We've got to fix Medicare. Our delegation, working as hard as they are, we have to help them build the kind of policy answers that they can take to Washington and fix for Rhode Island. There's some, you've talked to Sheldon about it, Senator Whitehouse. There's some odd dynamics with how Medicare works. And
the imputed rural floor.
Yes, Ted, you've talked to him about it, and that's exactly what I had in my head.
Even for this show.
I know, so we'll move on. Yeah. But then our commercial rates don't match Massachusetts and Rhode Island either. So your point, Tim, is well taken, but the question you asked focused on too small a slice of the overall pie.
Okay, General, we got to go to a break in about 1 minute, and we wanted to ask you about this. You spent a week in Normandy, France, as part of a delegation marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day, hosted by the Attorney General Alliance and the National Association of Attorneys General. Had you been there before?
Yes, with my wife and children in 2016.
What were your impressions being there this time around on the 80th anniversary?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's an incredibly moving place to be. And I did this time what I had done with my sons last time, which was we went to the American Cemetery in Normandy and looked for Rhode Islanders who are buried there. This time I found 4 additional young men who are buried there. And it is, how do I put this? In a day when Americans can't agree on anything, the sacrifice of those young men, and they are young men that are buried there, is particularly stark. And it is a place where it's a very quiet place. I think even children feel the quietness of the place. I can only describe it as incredibly moving. I'm the son of a Korean War veteran, and I don't know if that enhances how I feel when I go there, but I was grateful to go back with this delegation, and it was just very moving and very meaningful for me.
Well, it's certainly on my list to visit someday. We're going to take a break on the program. When we come back, the Attorney General is term limited, 2 years left. What's in his future? Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. This is Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is Attorney General Peter Neronha. General, as I said, going into the break, you're term limited. You have 2 years left. I'm going to ask a couple of questions about your political future, if there is one. Recent reporting, including our colleague Eli Sherman, in a profile he did of you in Rhode Island Monthly, suggested that you have decided not to run for governor. Is that still the case?
Yeah, look, I'm not, how do I put this? A lot of what I think about when I think about what I'll do when I'm 63, which is what I'll be when I finish my term, is driven by my health. And I had a health challenge last year that we've talked about before, and there's no reason to talk about it again. But as I truthfully, it's been a bit of a road back, and there have been high points and low points. And at the high points, I feel like I'm ready to serve somehow in some capacity going forward. And there are other days when I'm not so sure that that makes a lot of sense. But I will say this. I have as much energy today as I had when I became U.S. Attorney nearly 15 years ago. I don't have a lot of interest in the private sector, so to the extent I stay involved in public life, it'll be in public service. I'm just not sure how that manifests itself yet.
Some people have floated you running for lieutenant governor. Would you ever be interested in that?
I think it would depend on whether the person who was running for governor and I reached an understanding that my voice would be an important one, and there would be issues that I could focus on that fit my strengths. I think there were some, healthcare and climate being 2, but it would have to be the right person that I thought could lead the state in the right direction.
Well, brass tacks, what if it's Helena, folks?
Yeah, look, I think Helena, I think she would be a strong candidate for governor. I think very highly of her. I think she's bright, which I think is a starting point for anybody in leadership. I mean, you have to be smart enough to see the issues and try to respond to them. You got to be able to recruit good people around you. So I can see a situation like that because I don't love the trappings of governor. I want to focus on the work. But you have to keep in mind that being lieutenant governor can be a very sleepy place, and I'm not sure that fits with my personality. So we'll see. I don't know.
You're not getting out of the studio until I talk to you about public records. You know that.
Yeah.
I wrote a story, as did Ed Fitzpatrick at the Globe, that you have put government agencies, especially state agencies, on notice that you're going to start fining them for willful violations of the state's public records law. Look, a critic might say, you've been in office for 6 years. What took you so long to set the tone that government transparency is important?
Well, I think I've tried to do that, Tim, with a lot of our decisions. So take, for example, the convention center. None of the employees and their salaries would have come to light had we not ruled the way that we did. And so I think on some significant issues, we have certainly set the right path for transparency. I've been reluctant. Most of our issues where we see repeat offenders, frankly, come from local cities and towns. There's some frequent flyers, Woonsocket and Warwick and West Warwick, and we're in litigation with both. But what I have shied away from is, putting a fine on the cities and towns because of the
taxpayers pay for it, right? I mean,
yeah,
they feel it more for
they
with a
do
fine.
because so when a city or town solicitor does something stupid, frankly, I don't like seeing kids pay for it. And the dollar amounts aren't high, but to run a little league doesn't cost all that much money. But at some point, your tolerance for that changes, and you do see this pattern. So where we get to the point of fines. Or taking action, we have to go to court to enforce our decisions sometimes, and I've never been reluctant to do that. Had the governor not turned over the emails, for example, involving the trip to Philadelphia, we would have gone to court to force them to do that. So we're not afraid to do it, but I've been reluctant to put that burden on taxpayers. But you're right. I've been in office for 6.5 years. I feel like we've given people plenty of chances, plenty of training. We're available for them if they need help. At this point, if they're not doing it the right way, they have no excuse.
I have sort of an off the beaten path question for you. I was listening to a news report the other day about these riots they've been having in England, and I was amazed that this happened like last weekend, and they quickly had these court proceedings that led to sentences within days. And I do not know the exact ins and outs of how they've structured the criminal justice system in England, but it was interesting listening to their prosecutors talk about how they wanted very, very, very swift sentencing to send a message to everyone else to crack down on it. And it felt very different from our system where, cases can go on for quite a long time, it sometimes feels like. What do you think about the swiftness of our ability to move cases through the criminal justice system in Rhode Island, maybe nationally too? You were U.S. attorney.
Yeah, look, I think in the federal system, it can move quickly if you have the right judges. Judge Torrey's was just excellent. I mean, we had a speedy trial clock there, and he stuck to it. And if you weren't going to plead, you were going to trial, and the government was always ready. My view has always been that the state is always ready. When our cases call for trial in the state system, we should be ready to go. Look, I think when I'm out of office, I will have more freedom to comment on the state judicial system. I have some real concerns about it. I have concerns about...
You haven't exactly been shy about your comments about the state judiciary.
Yeah, I have more to say, frankly, but I don't want to impact how my people are treated in the courtroom, frankly. And so I'm going to hold my powder for now. Just 2.5 years later, I'll be able to speak more freely about it. And I will. I think we need to change a lot of things about the way our state judicial system works. I think we need to be more calendar-based rather than simply putting cases into the pool and they get pulled out at random. There are a few calendar. What I mean by a calendar is a judge gets a set of cases and manages them and gets them done. That works very well in the federal system. It can work in the state system. We don't do it that way. Look, I think Judge Gibney is as good a judge as you're going to find anywhere in the country. I have tremendous respect for her. She doesn't have enough judges to keep the courtrooms open. I mean, sheriffs to keep the courtrooms open.
Right.
There are a lot of things that need to be fixed there. But what I've found is that, how do I put this? The judiciary, some of them anyway, don't like me expressing my views, and I think that some of them have what I would call rabbit ears. So I'll hold my powder for a little bit. But I'll have plenty to say in a couple of years.
We look forward to that. All right, we got a couple minutes left, and I have to ask you about this controversy up in Woonsocket in the wake of our reporting into a questionable land deal up there while Mayor Baldelli Hunt was in office. The city council has forwarded the case onto law enforcement. People can read about it online, but the upshot is the deal involved the unauthorized purchase of land owned by someone Baldelli Hunt had a working relationship with. She has since stepped down. Is this case a better fit as law enforcement looks at it for your office or for the feds?
Depends what the facts are. That seems like a slippery answer. But it's really true. What are the facts and where do they fit, if at all, in a criminal setting? I'm going to speak very broadly here. The report, to my understanding, indicates that the law was broken, but the law is a Woonsocket city ordinance.
Yeah, you're right.
Let's be really clear. We're not going to bring a criminal case on violating a Woonsocket city ordinance, okay? That's not possible, and that's not going to happen. In every single case where a public official is involved, the way the Supreme Court has narrowed the law on public corruption is it's either a bribe or a kickback. If you don't have one of those things, you don't have a case. An undisclosed conflict of interest is not a criminal offense. The Supreme Court tossed that out many years ago now. Correct.
They won't stand anymore.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's either a bribe or a kickback. It's extortion or bribery. It's quid pro quo, this for that, and you got to prove that connection. You can't do that, you don't have a case. So what that means is there's a lot of, or there could be a lot of governmental conduct that most Rhode Islanders would view as sketchy, to use one of my kids' favorite words. But that doesn't mean it's a criminal offense. But it should be still exposed to the light of day, and we have tried to do that over the course of our administration.
I have like 30 seconds left. Ted reported this week that VP candidate Tim Walz is coming to Rhode Island for a fundraiser. You're a prominent Democrat. Are you going?
I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. I will say I thought Josh Shapiro would have been a great vice president.
Thought you'd say that.
Yeah. But he's an AG. Maybe I'm biased. But I will tell you this, that when I first became AG in 2018, we were all assigned through NAG a mentor, but we got to choose, and I chose Josh Shapiro, and I felt like it was a really good choice. For me, you know, I think that we are very similar. I mean, he is a no-nonsense, smart, I'm not saying I'm smart, but he is a smart guy. 15 seconds. And he's a plain speaker,
well, it's too late. He didn't get it.
He didn't get it. I don't know the governor of Minnesota very well, but I hope to learn more about him. And of course, I support the ticket.
Attorney General Peter Neronha, thanks for joining us. Stay with us.
Gentlemen.
You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. With Vice President Kamala Harris improving in the polls, some in Washington are speculating about who might wind up in her cabinet. And once again, Rhode Island U.S. Senator Jack Reed is being floated as a potential pick for Secretary of Defense, this time by the news outlet Axios. It's hardly the first time Reed's name has come up for that job, and over the years he has repeatedly said he isn't interested and wants to remain in the Senate. I caught up with Reed on Thursday, and he told me his mind has not changed. If President-elect Harris, let's say, calls you and says, Jack, I need you in the Pentagon, you would say no?
I would say I can recommend more appropriate candidates. I try to be helpful. But no, I've been asked before by presidents and vice presidential elects to be secretary. I've made it clear that, you know, I think I can contribute more as a member of the United States Senate.
Reed, of course, currently serves as chairman of the powerful Senate Armed Services Committee. He'll be up for re-election in 2026, and he has indicated on the show that he plans to run again. U.S. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is up for re-election this year. You can get Newsmakers on the go. Subscribe to our podcast right now by scanning the QR code right on your screen. To my right, there it is. And that way you can listen to us on your phone. I want to thank you for watching, and our guest, Attorney General Peter Neronha. We'll see you next week.